Episode 57 DDA February 11th, 2025 Biden-Harris used carrots to lead to useful and helpful changes. Biden-Harris used carrots to lead to useful and helpful carrots, but Trump uses sticks to lead to kleptocracy. In Episode 57 DDA 1 Introduction Rosep View 2 Substack Letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson February 9th, 2025 3 United States 36 hours after Russell Vought took over Consumer Bureau he shut its operations. The agency had been one of the most feared regulators on Wall Street with the power to issue rules on mortgages, credit cards, student loans, and other areas affecting financial lives of Americans. 4 California battery plant burned residents have gotten sick and anxious. Heavy metals detected in the soil have also created health implications for Monterey County's agriculture industry, and the workers who pick to produce 5. China is at the heart of Trump tariffs on steel and aluminum. Existing American tariffs already restrict steel and aluminum shipments from China, which is now flooding other markets with its exports instead. 6 United States Democrats hint at government shutdown to stop Trump axing at federal agencies. 2 Democratic senators from New Jersey Cory Booker and Andy Kim said Democrats should not vote for a spending package that would affirm President the Trump agenda in gutting federal agencies. 7 World abandoned in the middle of clinical trials because of a Trump order. The stop work order on USAID-funded research has left thousands of people with experimental drugs and devices in their bodies with no access to monitoring or care. USAID-funded clinical trials in more than a dozen countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. 8 United States. Charlie Kirk became the youth whisperer of the American right, collecting donors, voters, TikTok viewers, and high-powered friends on his way into the Trump inner circle. 9 Florida. How the new Trump era has upended Florida politics. The recent feud between Gov. Ron DeSantis and the legislature over immigration is a sign of more jockeying to come among Republicans over the next 2 years. 11 United States letters resisting Trump. What can be done? 12 United States guest essay. 5 former Treasury secretaries. Our democracy is under siege. 13 United States guest essay. Tenderness as an act of resistance. 15 United States Trump. 20 heralds an aggressive flexing of power. President the Trump early moves to slash the federal government and expand American territory represent significant ideological swings from his first term. 16 United States Trump is freezing money for clean energy. Red states have the most to lose. About 80% of manufacturing investments spurred by a Biden-era climate law have flowed to Republican districts. Efforts to stop federal payments are already causing pain. 17 United States Trump orders Treasury Secretary to stop minting pennies. Can he do that? It is not clear, but President Trump is right when he says that pennies literally cost us more than 2 cents. 18 New York Trump says he might use U.S. transit agency to kill congestion pricing. In an interview with the New York Post, President Trump said that congestion pricing hurt New York City, but indicated that he was still talking with Gov. Kathy Hochul. 19 United States Vance says judges are not allowed to control the Trump legitimate power. The declaration by the Vice President came as court orders have temporarily blocked parts of the Trump agenda. 20 United States J.D. Vance doubled down in March 2024 that a president should ignore the Supreme Court if it stopped him from dismantling the federal bureaucracy. 21 United States the Trump actions have created a constitutional crisis. Scholars say law professors have long debated what the term means, but now many have concluded that the nation faces a reckoning as President Trump tests the boundaries of executive power. 22 United States the Trump declaration allows the Musk efficiency team to skirt open records laws. Government watchdog groups say they will challenge the Trump decision to put the initiative under the Presidential Records Act, which shields its work from public disclosure. 23 United States with steel and aluminum tariffs. Trump launches familiar fight. The 25% tariff the president is proposing is almost identical to a move-in. His first-term economists and foreign governments know what will come next. 24 Europe. Planning a train trip in Europe? New sleeper trains and high-speed routes await. Also in the works, streamlined digital booking and Eurostar competition. 25 Europe. Trump to impose tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports. President Trump said he would impose a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports to the U.S. 26 Israel. Trump calls Gaza a big real estate site, reiterating plan for U.S. takeover. 27 Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson February 11th, 2025. Main content. 1 Introduction Rosep View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 28 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning replacing coal burning, with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the eco-design wood stove and international convention based on the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Burning wood instead of coal increases the adverse health effects of PM2.5 air pollution and hastens climate change. Stopping burning wood for residential home heating is an easy incremental way to be kind to your neighbor and to the planet. Choosing to burn wood when it is more expensive than heating your home with a heat pump that is less expensive when you use the United States heat pump rebates available in 2025 in many states is like choosing a gas-powered car above an electric car when both are of equal price. Many of the Trump tariffs will result in less manufacture of clean electric vehicles in the United States and less price reduction to customers on existing electric vehicles. Rosep view the United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, this article in a wood burning industry magazine admits that wood burning is a substantial source of PM2.5 emissions, yet this article, since it is in a magazine that is an arm of the wood burning industry, states that this wood burning should continue, presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM2.5, and PM2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. Wood burning emits 90% PM2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 28 times the PM2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning replacing coal burning. With wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the eco-design wood stove and international convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Rosep view purple air PM2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary. 2 Substack letters from an American excerpts edited by Rosep for brevity and clarity and relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Heather Cox Richardson, February 9, 2025. Musk and Trump appear to be concentrating the extraordinary wealth of the American people along with the power that wealth brings into their own hands for their own ends. Trump has championed further tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations, while Musk seems to want to make sure his companies, especially SpaceX, win as many government contracts as possible to fund his plan to colonize Mars. But the mission of the United States of America is not and has never been to return huge profits to a few leaders. The mission of the United States of America is stated in the Constitution. It is a government designed by we the people of the United States in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Far from being designed to concentrate wealth and power in the hands of a single man, it was formed to do the opposite: spread wealth and power throughout the citizenry of the country and enable them to protect their rights by voting for those who would represent them in Congress and the presidency, then holding them accountable at the ballot box. The people who think that bearing arms is central to maintaining American rights are the same people who tried to overturn the 2020 presidential election by storming the United States Capitol, because they do not command the votes to put their policies in place through the exercise of law outlined in the U.S. Constitution. On Friday, President Donald Trump issued an executive order protecting Second Amendment rights. The order calls for the Trump Attorney General to examine all gun regulations in the U.S. to make sure they do not infringe on the right to bear arms of any citizen. The executive order says that the Second Amendment is foundational to maintaining all other rights held by Americans. Heather Cox Richardson wrote, "In fact, it is the right to vote for the lawmakers who make up our government that is foundational to maintaining all other rights held by Americans. The United States Constitution that establishes the framework for our democratic government sets out how the American people will write the laws that govern us. We elect members to a Congress which consists of the House of Representatives and the Senate. That Congress of our representatives holds all legislative powers. That is, Congress alone has the right to make laws. It alone has the power to levy taxes on the American people, borrow money, regulate commerce, coin money, declare war, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper. After Congress writes, debates, and passes a measure, the Constitution establishes that it goes to the President, who is also elected through electors by the people. The President can either sign a measure into law or veto it, returning it to Congress, where members can either repass it over his veto or rewrite it. But once a law is on the books, the President must enforce it. The men who framed the Constitution wrote that the President shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. When President Richard Nixon tried to alter laws passed by Congress by withholding the funding Congress had appropriated to put them into effect, Congress shut that down quickly, passing a law explicitly making such impoundment illegal. Since the 1803 Marbury v. Madison decision of the Supreme Court, the federal courts have taken on the duty of judicial review, the process of determining determining whether a law falls within the rules of the Constitution. Right now, the Republicans hold control of the House of Representatives, the Senate, the presidency, and the Supreme Court. They have the power to change any laws they want to change according to the formula Americans have used since 1789 when the Constitution went into effect, but they are not doing that. Instead, officials in the Trump administration, as well as billionaire Elon Musk, who put $290 million into electing Trump and Republicans, and whose actual role in the government remains unclear, are making unilateral changes to programs established by Congress through executive orders and announcements. From the Musk Department of Government Efficiency, they have sidelined Congress, and Republicans are largely mum about the seizure of their power. Now MAGA Republicans are trying to neuter the judiciary after yet another federal judge stopped the Musk/Trump onslaught by temporarily blocking Musk and his team from accessing the records of Americans from Treasury Department computers. MAGA Republicans attack judges. Outrageous. Senator Tom Cotton, RAR, posted, spreading the lie that the judge barred the Secretary of the Treasury from accessing the information, although in fact he temporarily barred Treasury Secretary Bessent from granting access to others. Senator Mike Lee, RUT, said the decision had the feel of a judicial coup. Right-wing legal scholar Adrian Vermeule called it judicial interference with legitimate acts of State Vice President J.D. Vance, who would take over the office of the presidency if the 78-year-old Trump can no longer perform the duties of the office. Posted judges are not allowed to control the legitimate power of the executive, as legal scholar Steve Vladek noted. Just to say the quiet part out loud, the point of having unelected judges in a democracy is so that whether acts of state are legitimate can be decided by someone other than the people who are undertaking them. Vermeule knows this, of course, so the Vance statement. Aaron Rupar of Public Notice added, this is the sort of thing you post when you are ramping up to defying lawful court orders. The Republicans have the power to make the changes they want through the exercise of their constitutional power, but they are not doing so. This seems in part because Trump and his MAGA supporters want to establish the idea that the president cannot be checked, and this dovetails with the fact they are fully aware that most Americans oppose their plans. Voters were so opposed to the plan outlined in Project 2025, the plan now in operation, that Trump ran from it during the campaign. Popular support for the Musk participation in the government has plummeted as well. A poll from The Economist/YouGov released February 5 says that only 13% of adult Americans wanted to have a lot of influence, while 96% of respondents said that jobs and the economy were important to them, and 41% said they thought the economy was getting worse. The Trump MAGA Republicans know they cannot get the extreme changes they wanted through Congress, so they are instead dictating them, and Musk began his focus at the Treasury, establishing control over the payment system that manages the money American taxpayers pay to our government. Musk and MAGA officials claim they are combating waste and fraud, but in fact, when Judge Carl Nichols stopped Trump from shutting down USAID, he specifically said that government lawyers had offered no support for that argument in court. Indeed, the U.S. government already has the Government Accountability Office, GAO, an independent, nonpartisan agency that audits, evaluates, and investigates government programs for Congress. In 2023, the GAO returned about $84 for every $1 invested in it, in addition to suggesting improvements across the government until Trump fired 18 of them when he took office. Major departments also had their own independent inspectors general charged with preventing and detecting fraud, waste, abuse, misconduct, and mismanagement in the government, and promoting economy efficiency and effectiveness in government operations and programs. The Federal Bureau of Investigation also investigates corruption, including that committed by healthcare providers, according to the Musk-owned Grok artificial intelligence tool on X. The investigative departments of the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, the Department of Justice, DOJ, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, the National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Department of Transportation, the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, as well as USAID have all launched investigations into the practices and violations of Elon the Musk companies, but Trump has been gutting congressional oversight, apparently wanting to make sure that no one can oversee the president rather than rooting out waste and corruption in the government. Musk and his ilk have launched a hostile takeover to turn the United States of America into a business that will return huge profits to those leaders who, in the process of moving fast and breaking things, are placing themselves at the center of the lives of 332 million people. Breaking into the U.S. Treasury payment system puts Musk and his Doge team at the head of the country's nerve center. The vision they are enacting rips predictability as well as economic security away from farmers who are already protesting the loss of their markets with the attempted destruction of USAID. It hurts the states, especially Republican-dominated states, that depend on funding from the National Institutes of Health and the Department of Education. Their vision excludes consumers who are set to lose the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, as well as protections put in place by President Joe Biden. Their vision takes away protections for racial, ethnic, religious, and gender minorities, as well as from women, and kills funding for the programs that protect all of us, such as cancer research and hospitals. 3 United States 36 hours after Russell Vought took over Consumer Bureau, he shut its operations. The agency had been one of Wall Street's most feared regulators, with the power to issue rules on mortgages, credit cards, student loans, and other areas affecting Americans' financial lives. Excerpts edited by Rozef for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025, the day before Linda Wetzel closed on her retirement home in Southport, North Carolina in 2012, a cozy place where she could open the windows at night and catch an ocean breeze. The bank making the loan surprised her with a fee she hadn't expected. Ms. Wetzel scoured her mortgage paperwork and couldn't find the charge disclosed anywhere. Ms. Wetzel made the payment and then filed an online complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The bank quickly opened an investigation, and a month later, it sent her a $5,600 check. My first thought was, thank you. I was in tears. She recalled that money was a year or two of savings on my mortgage. It was my little nest egg. Ms. Wetzel's refund is a tiny piece of the work the Bureau has done since it was created in 2011. It has clawed back $21 billion for consumers. It slashed overdraft fees, reformed the student loan servicing market, transformed mortgage lending rules, and forced banks and money transmitters to compensate fraud victims. A rally on Saturday outside the bureaus Headquarters organized by its staff union drew a few hundred participants, a Maryland resident, who asked that her name be withheld for fear of retribution from the Trump allies, attended with her husband, a federal worker, to support the agency's employees. I don't think people understand what the CFPB does, she said. The administration said they are closing it because of fraud, but the Bureau's literal job is to protect people from fraud and junk fees and predatory lenders. Ms. Wetzel, the retiree who used her $5,600 refund to replace the floors in her new home, said the quick action on her complaint made her feel empowered. It was such a relief to have the government saying what the bank did was wrong, that this is not the rule of law, she said. For California, a California battery plant burned. Residents have gotten sick, and anxious. Heavy metals detected in the soil have also created health implications for Monterey County's agriculture industry and the workers who picked the produced excerpts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025. Last month, a battery storage plant went up in flames and burned for days, prompting the evacuation of more than 1,000 residents and shutting down local schools. The plant, located in Moss Landing, an unincorporated community in Monterey County, is the largest facility in the world that uses lithium-ion batteries to store energy. Residents have reported feeling ill, and many of them worry that the fire polluted the air, soil, and water with toxins. Now you don't see anybody walking outside because it is terrifying everything that is going on, said Esmeralda Ortiz, who had to evacuate from her home in Moss Landing after the plant began burning on January 16. People are in a such big moment of stress that they say it is one thing and another. Maria Terillo, who works packing berries, said of the fears of federal raids and the battery plant fire. Ms. Terillo has advised her fellow workers to take precautions by wearing masks and gloves as they face the potential of working land that could turn out to be hazardous to their health. For many men and women who labor in the fields, the pressing concern is that contaminated crops could result in less work. Then we don't have anything to pay for food or rent. Ms. Terillo said sometimes, no matter the state of the environment, we have to go work. 5. China is at the heart of Trump tariffs on steel and aluminum. Existing American tariffs already restrict steel and aluminum shipments from China, which is now flooding other markets with its exports instead. Excerpts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025. President Trump promised to impose 25% tariffs on Monday on all U.S. imports of steel and aluminum would primarily target American allies, but at their heart they strike at his longtime nemesis China. The top 5 suppliers of steel to the American market in January were Canada, followed by Brazil, Mexico, South Korea, and Germany. Canada has also led in aluminum exports to the United States, while the United Arab Emirates, Russia, and China are far behind. China does not export a lot of steel or aluminum directly to the United States. A succession of presidents and Commerce Department rulings have already imposed many tariffs on steel from China. Tariffs have also gone up lately on Chinese aluminum. Just last September, President Joseph R. Biden raised existing tariffs on many Chinese steel and aluminum products by up to 25%, but China dominates the global steel and aluminum industry. During his first term, President Trump imposed supplemental 25% tariffs on steel and 10% tariffs on aluminum imports from all over the world. He then exempted big steel-producing countries like South Korea, Australia, and Brazil from the tariffs in exchange for their imposing quotas for how many tons of steel they would ship each year to the United States, but he left the tariffs in place for China. The trade protections helped the American steel industry, which over the past 6 years has increased its capacity by about 1/5. Building modern steel mills. Older, less efficient mills have started to run at less than full production. By the last week of January, steel mills in the United States were operating at 744% of capacity, according to the American Iron and Steel Institute, a Washington-based industry group. 6. United States Democrats hint at government shutdown to stop the Trump axing at federal agencies. 2 Democratic senators from New Jersey, Cory Booker and Andy Kim, said Democrats should not vote for a spending package that would affirm President the Trump agenda in gutting federal agencies. Excerpts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 9, 2025. 2 Democratic senators said on Sunday that their party would not rule out forcing the federal government to shut down to stop President Trump's legally questionable actions in dismantling federal agencies. We are in a crisis right now, and Democrats will use every tool possible to protect Americans, Senator Cory Booker, Democrat of New Jersey, said on CNN. If Congress does not pass a new spending bill by March 14th, the federal government will shut down. Senator Andy Kim, Democrat of New Jersey, echoed Booker during an interview with NBC if Democrats do not supply the votes for continued federal funding, signaling their opposition to the Trump unilateral budget cuts, staff firings, and restructuring of federal agencies. It would be Trump and Republicans who would be responsible for the government shutdown, Kim said. I would be the last person to want to get to that stage, Kim said of a possible government shutdown, but we are at a point where we are basically on the cusp of a constitutional crisis. The 2 Democrats' allusion to the government shutdown in March reflects the limited options that their party has in checking Republicans who are in control of all levers of federal government. It also shows their willingness to use the March funding deadline as an important bargaining tool to limit the Trump sweeping action in tearing apart federal agencies funded and established by Congress. Representative Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat of New York, and the House Minority Leader, said last week that he was willing to work with Republicans in passing a similar bipartisan spending bill, but only if partisan measures for defunding certain agencies were choked off of that bill. However, Johnson indicated on Sunday that he had no interest in pushing through a bipartisan bill. He said he would instead work toward a Republican spending package that all 218 members of his caucus could agree on. The reconciliation process, which we are spending all the time on right now, is by design effectively a partisan exercise, Johnson said on Fox News. He was referring to the fast-track process for budget bills that would allow Republicans to avoid a Senate filibuster, which normally requires 60 votes to end. Some members of the House Republican caucus are still skeptical that they can agree on a bill by March 14th. Representative Chip Roy, Republican of Texas, and the policy chair of the far-right Freedom Caucus, said on Friday that chances were pretty low that the Republicans could agree on a spending package by the March deadline in January. Roy defied both Trump and Johnson by giving a fiery speech against his Republican colleagues, calling them asinine for working with Democrats in increasing the federal debt limit. Still, Johnson said he remained optimistic that he could unite the Republicans in pushing through a partisan spending bill with the narrowest House majority since 1910. We can get this job done, he said. We have time. It is early February and the deadline is March 14th. 7 world abandoned in the middle of clinical trials because of a Trump order. The stop work order on USAID-funded research has left thousands of people with experimental drugs and devices in their bodies with no access to monitoring or care. USAID-funded clinical trials in more than a dozen countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity. And relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 6, 2025. The U.S. Agency for International Development, which funded the study, had withdrawn financial support and had issued a stop work order to all organizations around the globe that receive its money. The abrupt move followed an executive order by President Trump freezing all foreign aid for at least 90 days. Since then, the Trump administration has taken steps to dismantle the agency entirely. A clinical trial in Uganda was testing a new regimen of tuberculosis treatment for children. The stop work order cuts those children off from potentially life-saving medication. You cannot walk away from them, you just cannot, a researcher in that trial said. 8 United States. Charlie Kirk became the youth whisperer of the American right, collecting donors, voters, TikTok viewers, and high-powered friends on his way into the Trump inner circle. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025. About an hour before Donald J. Trump took the oath of office, Charlie Kirk was sitting in the Capitol Rotunda when he glanced down at his iPhone. What the 31-year-old conservative activist and media personality saw caused him to swallow laughter. A reporter for the Daily Beast // had posted on X. Charlie Kirk has better seats than every member of Congress. Tells you how little Trump thinks of Congress. Is a rebuttal of sorts. Charlie Kirk has done more than most members of Congress combined to get us to this point today. I think a lot of it is going to be happening organically, like to have every major tech CEO standing up behind President Trump. Yes, President Trump wanted them there, but they also wanted to be there too, and that is a signal. I mean, you had Apple, TikTok, Amazon, Google, Meta, Elon, all the major communication companies, and they were giving tacit approval of this new administration, giving standing ovations. It is politics now influencing culture. Weren't these guys really just currying favor so that Trump did not punish everyone but Musk for being late to the party? Of course that is right, he said. Do I think they are like adherents to MAGA? No, that is not the thing, though. I think actually some of those tech CEOs are more right-wing than they would let on. Regardless, they were just like the Republican senators would soon be there to confirm the Trump nominees under threat of being primaried by Turning Point Action. And Kirk said, one of the biggest complaints we've always had as conservatives, and it was warranted, is give us a fair shot on your platforms and we'll win the culture. He leaned back in his chair with a faint smile. Well, he said, we were right. 9 Florida. How the new Trump era has upended Florida politics. The recent feud between Governor DeSantis and the legislature over immigration is a sign of more jockeying to come among Republicans over the next 2 years. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025. No state's political order has been more upended by President the Trump return to power than that of his adopted Florida. Trump stacked his new administration with Floridians leaving powerful positions vacant. Ambitious Republicans have jockeyed to fill them through special elections or appointments by the governor. The reshuffling has empowered Governor DeSantis, a Republican, to elevate close allies to prominent roles. DeSantis has not articulated a grand vision for what he would still like to accomplish beyond keeping Florida at the forefront of right-wing policy. 11 United States letters resisting Trump. What can be done? Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity. In relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025. To the editor regarding what this moment calls for. Editorial, February 9. The New York Times' editorial board is exactly right in stating in its online headline that now is not the time to tune out in response to all the illegal and immoral actions of the Trump administration. As the editorial board writes, federal judges are already ruling that President Trump, Elon Musk, and his tech henchmen are crossing legal lines. There needs to be a huge march on Washington organized by the leaders of all faiths to remind the nation and the world that Americans know how moral people behave. A woman from Bethesda, Maryland. Your editorial is an excellent summary of the chaos created by the Trump Musk bot wrecking team. It is right on point when it says the current situation demands wisdom, endurance, and courage. The Democratic leadership of both legislative houses, together with our former Democratic presidents, should take a united lead in bringing some rationality to our chaotic situation. They would be wise to convene an emergency committee that could quickly develop a set of principles and weekly report to the American people in prime time regarding what steps the Democratic leadership has taken in the past week and intends to take. In the near future, this coherent response could be staffed by legislative workers or an independent group chaired and funded by a wealthy but responsible leader such as Michael Bloomberg. Many of the problems raised will be resolved in the courts, but letting the public know what the leaders of a responsible opposition group are advocating in a coherent and constructive manner might go a long way toward giving hope and security to a public that is overwhelmed by our current reckless leaders. A man from New York. Thank you for a compelling summary of the illegal, unconstitutional, and ill-advised first weeks of this administration. I agree that as citizens we must meet the moment. The Times can help us do that. Quote President Trump verbatim in headlines and news stories. Your words sound sane. His are not key metrics could include days in office and number of potentially illegal or unconstitutional orders. Finally, report on the resistance prominently every day that visibility is the oxygen it needs to continue. A woman from Sonoma, California. I must say that as a moderate Democrat, are there any of us left? I have been tempted to tune out, as many of my close friends and relatives have. It is just such an effort to keep reading the Times every day and continually having to say he did what? But the concern for me is this: what will happen, as it inevitably will, if President Trump and his minions defy court decisions they do not agree with? Will the Constitution hold up? Will checks and balances really work? Will democracy even survive? A man from Vero Beach, Florida. Your editorial is a reminder that all of this insane rule by fiat could have been easily avoided if Democrats and independents had shown up to vote last November. In the numbers seen for Joe Biden in 2020, opting out is costing us dearly. A man from San Diego. 12 United States guest essay 5 former Treasury Secretaries Our Democracy is under siege excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025 by Robert E. Rubin, Lawrence H. Summers, Timothy F. Geithner, Jacob J. Liu, and Janet L. Yellen. The writers are former Treasury Secretaries when we had the honor of being sworn in as the 70th, 71st, 75th, 76th, and 78th Secretaries. Of the Treasury, we took an oath to support and defend the United States Constitution. Our roles were multifaceted. We sought to develop sound policy to advance the President's agenda and represent the economic interests of the United States on the world stage, but in doing that we recognized that our most fundamental responsibility was the faithful execution of the laws and Constitution of the United States. We were fortunate that during our tenures in office no effort was made to unlawfully undermine the nation's financial commitments. Regrettably, recent reporting gives substantial cause for concern that such efforts are underway today. The nation's payment system has historically been operated by a very small group of nonpartisan career civil servants. In recent days, that norm has been upended, and the roles of these nonpartisan officials have been compromised by political actors from the so-called Department of Government Efficiency we have during our service in the Treasury Department faced moments of crisis when the specter of an American default loomed. Any hint of the selective suspension of congressionally authorized payments will be a breach of trust and ultimately a form of default, and our credibility once lost will prove difficult to regain. Robert Rubin, Lawrence Summers, Timothy Geithner, Jacob Liu, and Janet Yellen are former Treasury Secretaries. 13 United States guest essay Tenderness as an act of resistance excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025 Until 2016 we lived in a democracy governed mostly by elected officials who loved this country and wanted to do right by it, even if they held sharply divergent views of right. Now we live in a country governed by a party of cruelty, and often it feels like the only thing left to do is rage against the dying of the light. We have to stay heartbroken about this. Fury is a powerful motivator of resistance, but there is only so much rage a person can harbor without nurturing something cold and still and hard in the place where a warm living heart once beat. Already I am exhausted by my own fury, and the second Trump presidency is only 3 weeks old. I've learned to let the beauty of the world and the bravery of other people pull me up and out of the despair. I thought of Ms. DeCamillo when I read about the Democrat Senate sit-in and the countrywide protest held last week. I thought of her when the FBI's acting director Brian Driscoll stood up to the bullies demanding the names of agents who worked on January 6 cases, when security officials at the U.S. Agency for International Development refused to give Elon Musk access to internal systems, and again when Ellen L. Weintraub, the chairwoman of the Federal Election Commission, refused to step down after President Trump fired her on social media. 14 United States guest essay Welcome to America's Fourth Great Constitutional Rupture excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025 The scope of President the Trump challenge to the existing constitutional order largely through a blitzkrieg of executive orders, many of them in blatant disregard of established precedent and legislation, suggests we may be in the process of another discontinuous and disruptive moment. Constitutional forms may change, but government of the people by the people and for the people must not perish from the earth. 15 United States Trump 20 heralds an aggressive flexing of power. President the Trump early moves to slash the federal government and expand American territory represent significant ideological swings from his first term. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025 In a few important ways, the Trump return to power has been signified by some profound ideological swings as he moves to remake Washington, America, and the world on both the domestic front and in foreign affairs. Trump has shifted to a different, even more aggressive approach toward the role of government and the posture of the United States on the global stage. The 45th president was never much of a shrink the government conservative. In fact, he was as free spending as many Democrats, and thanks in large part to COVID-19 relief, left behind the largest peacetime government in history. But now the 47th president has unleashed Elon Musk to put the federal government through his wood chipper. As the billionaire put it, one agency after another. Trump is still a big spender, she said. Cutting $1 billion from DI government contracts and Politico subscriptions will not make up for increasing defense and border spending by $325 billion as Congress is preparing to do. 16 United States Trump is freezing money for clean energy. Red states have the most to lose. About 80% of manufacturing investments spurred by a Biden-era climate law have flowed to Republican districts. Efforts to stop federal payments are already causing pain. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025 In less than 3 weeks, President Trump has thrown the U.S. clean energy industry into chaos, with much of the economic damage hitting Republican states and districts. In a quest to eliminate any funding linked to climate change, the Trump administration has frozen federal grants for everything from battery factories to electric school buses and issued executive orders that have halted federal approvals for wind and solar projects. Trump and Republicans in Congress are also working to repeal the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, which is projected to pour hundreds of billions of dollars over the next decade into low-carbon energy technologies through tax credits, loans, and grants. So far, Republican voting communities have benefited the most from that law in the nearly 3 years since it was passed. Private companies chasing the law's tax breaks have announced plans to spend $1,658 billion to build factories that make solar panels, wind turbines, electric vehicles, and more, according to new data from Atlas Public Policy, a research firm. Roughly 80% of those investments are in Republican congressional districts, where they are creating a once-in-a-generation manufacturing boom. Behind-the-scenes, energy lobbyists said Republican lawmakers were aware of the damage that a halt in clean energy investments could do to their hometowns. We just met with more than a dozen key Republican offices, and I can tell you nobody wants to kill jobs, said Bob Keefe, executive director of E2, a nonpartisan group of business leaders and investors. They don't want to have to go back and face constituents and tell them that the factory I just cut the ribbon on might not be coming. 17 United States Trump orders Treasury Secretary to stop minting pennies. Can he do that? It is not clear, but President Trump is right when he says that pennies literally cost us more than 2 cents. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025. Since taking office, President Trump has set his sights on big targets like Greenland, but he has also taken aim at small ones like paper straws and pennies. On Sunday night, Trump said he had ordered the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to stop producing new pennies, a move that he said would help reduce unnecessary government spending. Penny proponents have also argued that eliminating the coin would effectively impose a 1-cent sales tax on consumers because prices ending in 99 cents are so common, but much of the resistance may have to do with sentimentality, said Professor Stokel. People will put it in a paperweight or something. There'll probably be some hoarding, he said of the penny. It is just a memento kind of thing, there's no significance. 18 New York. Trump says he might use U.S. transit agency to kill congestion pricing. In an interview with the New York Post, President Trump said that congestion pricing hurt New York City, but indicated that he was still talking with Gov. Kathy Hochul. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 9, 2025. President Trump said that he was considering using the Federal Department of Transportation to kill congestion pricing, which he claimed was deterring people from coming into Manhattan. Options could include withholding federal transportation funds or revoking a key federal authorization to toll drivers. He also said that he was still in discussions with Gov. Kathy Hochul about the future of congestion pricing and other matters. The president also vowed in the interview to eliminate bike lanes, which are approved by the New York City Department of Transportation. They are dangerous. These bikes go at 20 miles an hour. They are whacking people, he said. Charging most vehicles a $9 fee to enter Manhattan below 60th Street is destructive to New York. The president said, if I decide to do it, I will be able to kill it off in Washington through the Department of Transportation. Trump said Trump, a lifelong New Yorker before he moved to Florida, maintains a deep interest in the city's affairs. Among the options that President Trump could use to dismantle congestion pricing would be the threat of revoking federal funding from the Department of Transportation or of reopening the environmental review process for the program. Early results show that congestion pricing has reduced traffic in the congestion zone, increased public transit use, and sped up trips for some commuters. Congestion pricing has been in the courts in multiple states, and it wins every time because the program was so carefully and thoroughly vetted by multiple federal agencies. Perlstein said there's no taking that back in spite of the political winds. Jack Begg contributed research. 19 United States. Vance says judges are not allowed to control the Trump legitimate power. The declaration by the vice president came as court orders have temporarily blocked parts of the Trump administration's agenda. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 9, 2025. Vice President J.D. Vance declared on Sunday that judges are not allowed to control the legitimate power of the executive, delivering a warning shot to the federal judiciary in the face of court rulings that have for now stymied aspects of the Trump agenda. The statement issued on social media came as federal judges have temporarily barred a slew of Trump administration actions from taking effect. 20 United States. J.D. Vance doubled down in March 2024 that a president should ignore the Supreme Court if it stopped him from dismantling the federal bureaucracy. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 9, 2025. Two Democratic senators said on Sunday that their party would not rule out forcing the federal government to shut down to stop President Trump legally questionable actions in dismantling federal agencies. We are in a crisis right now, and Democrats will use every tool possible to protect Americans. Senator Cory Booker, Democrat of New Jersey, said on CNN, if Congress does not pass a new spending bill by March 14th, the federal government will shut down. Senator Andy Kim, Democrat of New Jersey, echoed Booker during an interview with NBC Representative Chip Roy, Republican of Texas, and the policy chair of the far-right Freedom Caucus, said on Friday that chances were pretty low that the Republicans could agree on a spending package by the March deadline. In January, Roy defied both Trump and Johnson by giving a fiery speech against his Republican colleagues, calling them asinine for working with Democrats in increasing the federal debt limit. Still, Johnson said he remained optimistic that he could unite the Republicans in pushing through a partisan spending bill with the narrowest House majority since 1910. We can get this job done. He said we have time. It is early February, and the deadline is March 14th. 21 United States. The Trump actions have created a constitutional crisis. Scholars say law professors have long debated what the term means, but now many have concluded that the nation faces a reckoning as President Trump tests the boundaries of executive power. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025. There is no universally accepted definition of a constitutional crisis, but legal scholars agree about some of its characteristics. It is generally the product of presidential defiance of laws and judicial rulings. It is not binary. It is a slope, not a switch. It can be cumulative, and once one starts, it can get much worse. It can also be obvious, said the dean of the law school at the University of California, Berkeley. We are in the midst of a constitutional crisis right now, he said on Friday. There have been so many unconstitutional and illegal actions in the first 18 days of the Trump presidency. We never have seen anything like this. Goldsmith is a law professor at Harvard and a former Justice Department official in the George W. Bush administration. Bauer was White House counsel for President Barack Obama. They are students of Article 2 of the Constitution, which sets out the powers of the president. The Trump executive orders have some features suggesting that they mean to test legal theories in the Supreme Court, they wrote, but in the aggregate, they added, they seem more like pieces of a program in the form of law defiance for a mini-constitutional convention to amend Article 2 across a broad front. 22 United States. The Trump declaration allows the Musk efficiency team to skirt open records laws. Government watchdog groups say they will challenge the Trump administration's decision to put the initiative under the Presidential Records Act, which shields its work from public disclosure. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025. In October, Elon Musk preached the message of government transparency during a presidential campaign rally he held in Pennsylvania in support of Donald J. Trump, suggesting that nearly all government records should be made public. There should be no need for FOIA requests, Musk reiterated on X, referring to the law that gives the public the right to obtain copies of federal agency records. The Freedom of Information Act. All government data should be default public for maximum transparency, but the Musk cost-cutting initiative better known as the Department of Government Efficiency or DOGE appears to be heading in the opposite direction. At least two nonprofit watchdog Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington and the Center for Biological Diversity have filed public records requests on the Musk team. Both groups said that they would file lawsuits against the Trump administration if it does not answer their records requests. I agree with Elon Musk because everything should be transparent, said Jordan Libowitz, a spokesman for Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. But that is the opposite of what we're getting. 23 United States with steel and aluminum tariffs. Trump relaunches familiar fight. The 25% tariff the president is proposing is almost identical to a move in his first term. Economists and foreign governments know what will come next. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025. President Trump is poised to move forward with sweeping tariffs on foreign steel and aluminum on Monday, re-upping a policy from his first term that pleased domestic metal makers but hurt other American industries and ignited trade wars with allies on multiple fronts. The 25% tariffs that the president said he would impose on foreign steel and aluminum will be welcomed by domestic steelmakers who argue they are struggling to compete against cheap foreign metals as they did during the Trump first term. U.S. metal makers have been lobbying the administration for protection, and Trump officials agree that a strong domestic metal sector is essential for U.S. national security, but the tariffs will invite plenty of controversy. They are likely to rankle America's allies like Canada and Mexico, who supply the bulk of U.S. metal imports, and they could incite retaliation on U.S. exports, as well as pushback from American industries that use metals to make cars, food packaging, and other products. Those sectors will face significantly higher prices after the tariffs go into effect. That is what happened in the Trump first term when he slapped 25% tariffs on foreign steel and aluminum, while he and President Biden eventually ended up rolling back those tariffs on most major metal suppliers. They were often replaced with other trade barriers like quota. Studies have shown that while the measures helped U.S. metal makers, they ended up hurting the broader economy because they raised prices for so many other industries. Chris Swanger, the chief executive of the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, which represents the whiskey industry, said in a statement that the tariff would have a catastrophic outcome for 3,000 small distilleries across the United States. We are urging that the U.S. and EU move swiftly to find a resolution. Swanger said our great American whiskey industry is at stake. 24 Europe, planning a train trip in Europe? New sleeper trains and high-speed routes await. Also in the works, streamlined digital booking and Eurostar competition. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025. European passenger rail travel continues to expand with a flurry of new routes opening and competition heating up on key routes, including on the rail line that runs below the English Channel. Plans to streamline the booking process across Europe could also make rail travel easier and more efficient. The European Commission is encouraging the push. 25 Europe, Trump to impose tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports. President Trump said he would impose a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports to the U.S. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Union's executive arm, is set to meet with Vice President J.D. Vance in Paris on Tuesday as Europe braces for the latest American tariff announcements. President Trump is expected to announce steel and aluminum tariffs on Monday, followed by more wide-ranging reciprocal tariffs on Tuesday or Wednesday. Both would be likely to affect the European Union, weighing on metal producers and potentially seeking to equalize tariff rates between the two economies on key products like cars. What the complete tariff package might look like remains uncertain. We will not respond to broad announcements without details or written clarification. Olaf Gill, a spokesman at the EU executive arm, the European Commission, said during a news conference on Monday, we will react to protect the interests of European businesses, workers, and consumers from unjustified measures. The European Union has 27 member countries, and taken as a whole is America's single largest trading partner. European tariffs on American products are just slightly higher than American tariffs overall, based on estimates by researchers at ING Bank, but in some categories European tariffs are notably steeper, 10% compared with 25% for U.S. automobiles. For instance, the European Union has been preparing behind the scenes for fresh tariffs, but Ms. von der Leyen has repeatedly emphasized that a trade war would cost both economies dearly, and that Europe stands ready to negotiate to avoid one, potentially previewing the tone she will take with Vance at their meeting this week. Ms. von der Leyen is in Paris for a summit on artificial intelligence attended by many European and other world leaders. Vance has been an outspoken critic of European technology regulation. 26 Israel, Trump calls Gaza a big real estate site, reiterating plan for U.S. takeover. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, February 10, 2025. President Trump again reiterated his proposal for the United States to take over Gaza, telling reporters on Air Force One on Sunday that the strip of land was a big real estate site that the United States was going to own. He said the U.S. would be responsible for disposing of unexploded munitions and rebuilding Gaza, ultimately turning it into what he called the Riviera of the Middle East. 27 Substack letters from an American. Excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Heather Cox Richardson, February 11, 2025. As soon as President Donald Trump took office, his administration froze great swaths of government funding, apparently to test the theory popular with Project 2025 authors that the 1974 law forbidding the president from impounding money Congress had appropriated was unconstitutional. The loss of funding has hurt Americans across the country today. Farmers who had signed contracts with the U.S. Department of Agriculture to improve infrastructure and who had paid up front to put in fences, plant different crops, and install renewable energy systems with the promise the government would provide financial assistance are now left holding the bag, with Republicans in Congress largely mum about this and other power grabs by the administration. The courts are holding the line. The chief judge of the U.S. District Court for the District of Rhode Island today found that the Trump administration has refused to disperse federal funding despite the court's clear and unambiguous temporary restraining order saying it must do so. The judge said the administration must immediately restore frozen funding and clear any hurdles to that funding until the court hears arguments about the case. This includes the monies withheld from the farmers. This evening, a female Massachusetts U.S. District Judge blocked the Trump appointees at the National Institutes of Health from implementing the rate change they wanted to to apply to NIH grants, but the only relief sought is for the 22 Democratic-led states that have sued, keeping Republican-dominated states from freeloading on their Democratic counterparts today. In Talking Points memo, it appears a pattern is emerging in which Democratic-led states are suing the administration, while officials from Republican-led states, which are even harder hit by the Trump cuts than their Democratic-led counterparts, are asking Trump directly for help or exceptions. As soon as he took office, the Trump director of the Office of Management and Budget, Russell Vought, who was a key author of Project 2025 and who is also acting as the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, announced he was shuttering the agency. That closure was a recommendation of Project 2025, which called the Consumer Protection Agency a shakedown mechanism to provide unaccountable funding to leftist nonprofits. Immediately, the National Treasury Employees Union sued him, saying that Vaught's directive to employees to stop working reflects an unlawful attempt to thwart Congress's decision to create the CFPB to protect American consumers. MAGA loyalists, particularly Vice President J.D. Vance, have begun to suggest they will not abide by the rule of law. But before Trump and Vance took office, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts called out the Vance hints that he would be willing to defy the rulings of federal courts as dangerous suggestions that must be soundly rejected. Today, the American Bar Association took a stand against the Trump administration's wide-scale affronts to the rule of law itself, as it attacks the Constitution and tries to dismantle departments and agencies created by Congress without seeking the required congressional approval to change the law. The American Bar Association supports the rule of law, the president of the organization said in a statement. That means holding governments, including our own, accountable. He cheered on the courts that are treating these cases with the urgency they require. Refusing to spend money appropriated by Congress under the euphemism of a pause is a violation of the rule of law and suggests that the executive branch can overrule the other two co-equal branches of government. The ABA president wrote, "This is contrary to the constitutional framework and not the way our democracy works. The money appropriated by Congress must be spent in accordance with what Congress has said. It cannot be changed or paused because a newly elected administration desires it." Today, 5 former Treasury secretaries wrote an op-ed in the New York Times that also reinforced the legal lines of our constitutional system, warning that our democracy is under siege. Robert E. Rubin and Lawrence H. Summers, who served under President Bill Clinton, Timothy F. Geithner and Jacob J. Lew, who served under President Barack Obama, and Janet L. Yellen, who served under President Joe Biden, spoke up about the violation of the United States Treasury's nonpartisan payment system by political actors working in Elon Musk Department of Government efficiency. That Doge team lacked training and experience to handle private personal data, they note, like social security numbers and bank account information. Their involvement risks exposing highly sensitive information and even risks the failure of critical infrastructure as they muck around with computer codes. The former Treasury secretaries noted that on Saturday morning a federal judge had temporarily stopped those Doge workers from accessing the department's payment and data systems, warning that access could cause irreparable harm. While significant data privacy, cybersecurity, and national security threats are gravely concerning, the former secretaries wrote, the constitutional issues are perhaps even more alarming. The executive branch must respect that Congress controls the nation's money, they wrote, reiterating the key principle outlined in the Constitution. The legislative branch has the sole authority to pass laws that determine where and how federal dollars should be spent. The Treasury Department cannot decide which promises of federal funding made by Congress it will keep and which it will not. The letter read, the Trump administration may seek to change the law and alter what spending Congress appropriates, as administrations before it have done as well, and should the law change, it will be the role of the executive branch to execute those changes, but it is not for the Treasury Department or the administration to decide which of our congressionally approved commitments to fulfill and which to cast aside. That warning appears as Trump indicates that he is willing to undermine the credit of the United States. Yesterday on Air Force One, he told reporters that the members of the administration trying to find wasteful spending have suggested that they have found fraud in Treasury bonds and that the United States might have less debt than we thought. The suggestion that the U.S. might not honor its debt is a direct attack on the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which says that the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. That amendment was written under similar circumstances when former Confederates sought to avoid debt payments and undermine the power of the federal government. The Wall Street Journal reported yesterday that for CEOs and bankers, the Trump euphoria is fading fast. Consumers are losing confidence in the economy and observers expect inflation, while business leaders find that trying to navigate the Trump on-again, off-again tariffs is taking all their attention. Meanwhile, Trump has continued his purge of government employees he considers insufficiently loyal to him. On Friday, he tried to get rid of Ellen Weintraub of the Federal Elections Commission, who contended that her removal was illegal. He also fired Colleen Shogan, the Archivist of the United States, head of the National Archives and Records Administration, NARA, the government agency that handles presidential records. The archivist is the official responsible for receiving and validating the certified electoral ballots for presidential elections, a process the Trump people tried to corrupt after he lost the 2020 presidential election. It was NARA that first discovered the Trump retention of classified documents and demanded their return, although Shogan was not the archivist in charge at the time. The excuse offered after World War II by enablers of the fascist Nazi regime of just following orders has long been rejected in this country's jurisprudence. Today, Trump fired David Huittema, director of the Office of Government Ethics, the department that oversees political appointments and helps nominees avoid conflicts of interest. On Friday, Trump fired the head of the Office of Special Counsel, U.S. Special Counsel Hampton Dellinger. That office enforces federal whistleblower laws as well as the law that prohibits federal employees from engaging in most political activity. The Hatch Act Congress provided that the special counsel can be removed only for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office, and today Dellinger sued, calling his removal illegal. Tonight, Judge Amy Berman Jackson blocked the Dellinger firing through Thursday as she hears arguments in the case.